I'm trying some background music. Tell me how the sound balance. Um, Peter Thel recently has been talking about how seasteading is an engineering issue. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, but even then, there was no engineering issues. There is monetary, financial, or um, legal issues, but there is no engineering issue that I can think of in this millennium. These seasteads already exist, so maybe they're not a complete biome where everything is there, a complete self-sufficient system, but they do exist. And this is the current uh, plan for his organization, though he's not currently the CEO or anything. And in more than a decade ago, between cyberspace and aerospace lies the possibility of settling the oceans. This is another concept. Currently, they have a plan for the Freedom Ship. And I believe it's Seasteading Inc., which was the organization that Elon Musk, and many others founded initially. Now, you could just purchase for, several $1,000,000 a solution. Now, I would start with just a couple barges that could be purchased off of Alibaba and sailed to the location. And as long as the depth is not too great, you could just turn the sand into arrowcrete. Now, it would require sorry about the ums. It would require the components to make arrowcrete besides sand. You may want a filler. And there are several recipes for arrowcrete, which if you're interested, but the best is just going to be sand and soap in air, and probably a filler like fiberglass. Now, I have been thinking about a plan, and recently watching two different TV shows and movies. You could just go with this plant here, and it would alone would be wave resistant and easily generate enough hydropower to power your entire plan. I would, of course, modify this and not have the center here open to, this would be rain collection or mist collection facilities, and would be sealed so that the air was not escaping, and you could be using it as a reverse turbine during the sunlight hours. This would all be solar panels. So, easily with 30 million, you could purchase a right here off of this website. I'll try to put the link in the description. And from $500,000 to $1 million, you can just buy a floating houseboat off of Alibaba and many other providers. And for $2 million to billions of dollars, you could buy a pontoon system, which would just pump up on site and provide everything you need. You could build a custom, and you can purchase these. I have a connection off of Alibaba to purchase one for realistically $3 million. But that on the own would not be, you're like, what are the engineering issues? Well, if you combine vertical farming with housing, then all of your problems of being out on the ocean are all solved. And you're like, well, could you build a concrete block that could support this many people? And just combining the building from Andor and this, you then have a fully self-sufficient gardens, aquaculture, and sunlight that would support all of, many thousand people. Salmon farming, aquaculture is not new. And so you could just simply add one of these and have a self-sufficient protein source. Here's another underwater concept. Now, the difference between what Freedom Ship wants and what Morgantown would be is it would be a symbiosis with the local ecosystem, not just an island thrown out on the ocean. First, I would start with a megawatt of solar panels, and these would provide more than enough power. And in addition to providing solar, they would provide gravity storage and thermal storage. And this would be a completely free, I agree, I am a progressive libertarian. So one of the key reasons you'd want to come here is the laissez-faire government of a society like this. Now, you're like Aerocretes. If you've just watched some YouTube videos and Google it, it would just fall apart. But if you just simply put some marine high-density panels that would prevent, this stuff is nearly indestructible to salt water. That's your big problem. I guess maybe you were saying that salt water destroys things, but this high-density polyethylene cannot be damaged by wind waves. Now, maybe a hurricane force wind and a badly designed engineering could tear a panel off. But with these wind resistant construction and concrete underlayment, and then reinforced concrete, the structure would be wave, wind, and hurricane proof. So what is Aerocretes? Now, there are many different chemical compositions And we would start maybe just by buying blocks like this that would come preloaded on one of the barges. We would buy a barge, a concrete barge, that one would be the construction thing and one could just come loaded. We just loaded up with one loaded up with the crane and supplies, and one loaded up to make aerocrete with all the supplies to make aerocrete and starters for all of the aquaculture. Now, of course, to be self-sufficient, we would have to do, I mean, we wouldn't have to, but I would recommend vertical agriculture, where one layer provides the nutrients for the next. Now, my system, of course, would be much more food web based as opposed to just providing the different nutrients for humans. So I wouldn't start with a high population of people, but a high, I would start with workforce, and it's more of a societal problem than a engineering issue. You could just buy off the shelf vertical agricultural system and pay. You could purchase it assembled, where you're buying assembly and a crew would just come out and build the whole thing for you. But I would add this mini layered approach with a deep water culture. So you would start by converting. I would go half and half. Just take the seawater and start. You could just start by sterilizing it and adding the cultures you would want. You could also so I would divide it 3 ways. One, just pump it out and see what naturally grows. Just provide sunlight, and maybe because my specialty is water testing, I would be able to tell you what nutrients you're missing. So you just build this vertical system where you have salt water and fresh water, and they're mixing with species like Nile tilapia and brine shrimp. You can actually grow life in your brine that you're producing and using that to feed your fry. And as this system works through, the waste products are all being removed naturally. Now, one of the big problems with wave power, which I mentioned in the other video, using an aquaponics system, using a hydro system, typically you need a very high head height, and the 11 meters that you could get with a wave just isn't going to provide enough head. Though, if you put a column of water all the way down to the seafloor and use the 100 meters of seawater as your driving force, you would, or even on the continental shelf, you put this on the edge of the continental shelf and you have 1,000 meters of head. You could go even deeper, and at that point the head becomes so much that you would need to pressurize the vessel so that it is not being crushed. Not really pressurized, but put it in a concrete block or something. Now, like I said, you could just buy this simple pipe and put it on the seafloor. So you're filtering the seawater slightly so that logs and large particulates are not going in your head, in your centripetal pumps that are providing energy during the day. And so some would just 24 hours a day providing energy. And because the ocean is very cold and the surface is going to get very hot, the solar panels and all, through thermal neutrality, you are going to be able to balance out the system just because you have cold salt water. Now, I would use these 3 carbon neutral building components. Marine grade plywood would be the natural choice, but I would only use that for rare, or if you wanted to build something cheaply. Both, I would start with 1 completed shipping containers. These are basically junk. You can buy these for pennies on the dollar and then just coat them with these sheets and they become seawater proof. Now, it's not that simple, but by just buying these 2 components, you've converted a shipping container, which is just going to be rotting out in the desert somewhere, into a airtight, seawater tight shelter. So there are no engineering problems, but there are tons of societal and cultural problems with setting up a seasteading community. If there's interest, I will cover what the real problems are.